Impact Leadership by Omdena is a series supporting and promoting thoughtful and sustainable leadership with a focus on building solutions to solve some of the most pressing problems of the world. In Impact Leadership by Omdena, we bring together the civic society world and the tech world to discuss and create the impact for a better future. Rudrada Mitra, CEO of Omdena, is the host of the series. Subscribe to our Impact Leadership newsletter on Omdena's website to be notified about new pieces of meaningful content.
Welcome all. I have the great pleasure to have with us David Hanson to Omdena Impact Leadership Podcast. As many of you know, David is the CEO of Hanson Robotics and the creator of Sophia Robot. Sophia Robot is the first robot to be granted a citizenship from a country. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
So I had a quick look at your background, and I understand that you started robotics journey quite early on. And in 2004, you presented K-Bot while being still a grad student at UT Dallas. And further on after that, you went on to work in Disney and Universal Studio. So what we would love to hear is what made you fascinated by robots at such early times when it was not such a big thing to do.
Sure. I actually made my first humanoid robot in 1994 and was working on a robotics project as part of an educational competition in 1991 and 92, which won the Odyssey of the Mind World Educational Competition. I went to film school at Rhode Island School of Design and took courses in artificial intelligence programming and was in the Brown Artificial Intelligence and Robotics Club building robots. I had a passion for the concept of robots and AI as the new cinema to create a kind of interactive cinematic experience. I went to work doing Disney and Universal Studios theme park sculptures in the late 1990s, starting in 2006 after I graduated undergraduate degree from Rhode Island School of Design and Film Animation Video. So with that animation background and a talent for sculpting and a knack for hacking and building things, basic electronics and a little bit of programming, and I moved into technical development, doing robotics development at Disney. So the last 2 years that I was at Disney, I was doing robotics development from 1999 until 2001. And after that, I began work on my graduate school, getting an interdisciplinary PhD in interactive arts and engineering. So that was a collaboration between the School of Computer Science and the School of Arts and Humanities. About a third of my courses were actually in cognitive science and neuroscience.
I must admit that this is a very unusual combination of several different disciplines, art, science, and engineering. Few people choose to combine such different fields when studying. So how did such a mix define your career?
I was very interested in how all of these disciplines can be combined. I had the great fortune throughout all of these experiences to collaborate with many other developers and be mentored. And so I had opportunities to publish and co-author various papers together and present at science conferences and so forth.
And I suppose, as mentioned previously, all those experiences connected with studying different disciplines helped you to discover your true passion, which is, I presume, creating and building machines. So when did you actually develop your first robot?
Actually, it was developed in 2003, the K-Bot. And in 2004, I was invited then to present that at Wired Next Fest. I presented actually 2 different robots at Wired and also at the TED conference. Then IEEE Spectrum did a profile on me, and I was making during that time about 5 robots, original robots every year, pushing forward the materials because I knew that the materials used in animatronics and social robots weren't sufficient. So I was really trying to explore material science and self-assembling materials. Like if I could create a self-assembling porous structure with the right kind of architecture in elastomer, then I would be able to create something that would be soft and supple like the human face, and then we'd be able to move it through the full range of facial expressions.
That's really interesting. I suppose those were beginning of your experiments with the creation of humanoid robots. So what are some of the other examples of robots you have built?
By 2005, I had a pretty good formula, developed a robot that was an android portrait of science fiction writer Philip K. Dick. And later in 2005, made another portrait, this one of Albert Einstein, which I combined with the Hubo walking robot from Korean Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, KAIST. And that created maybe the first expressive android, battery operated, walking around with a little bit of artificial intelligence so it could see faces and have conversations. For the Philip K. Dick android, I teamed up with the University of Memphis Auto Tutor Group. We and some other developers put in Philip K. Dick's writings into a latent semantic index so you could have a conversation with Philip K. Dick. It's kind of like a digital ghost, but a very powerful experience. So we were showing that as a work of art.
I think there is also another example how your interdisciplinary background influenced your work related to the creation of robots. Were you building those machines because it was a form of art for you?
I also considered it to be a platform for new kinds of science, human AI interaction, new kinds of interface design based on the arts, and also a means for studying human reaction to different kinds of humanoid interfaces. Being an artist, I'm very interested in that, but also taking cognitive science courses and some courses focused on neuroscience. I wanted to know how people are responding to this. There was this little thing called the uncanny valley proposed by Japanese robotics researcher Masahiro Mori in the late 1960s, called the uncanny valley. He proposed that if you tried to make a humanoid robot look human, at all realistic, it would get very, very creepy until you made it look perfectly human. And that, to me, didn't make sense. Like, we don't have necessarily neural circuits for detecting realism, right? We're not evolved for that. Human reactions aren't just like positive or negative. And if you look at art history, you can see all kinds of levels of realism in different ways, used differently to create characters that are lovable and that you emotionally connect with. And at the same level of realism, you can create characters that are scary or repulsive. You know, Disney and various kinds of animation and computer animation also kind of back this up. But it does seem like realism is harder, being a sculptor of realism and, you know, doing realistic figure drawings. And it's just more variables to deal with. It's harder to balance all of those. You know, it's like a multi-variable optimization problem. The more variables you throw in, the harder it gets. And so it seemed to me that there was potentially some benefits to making realism because we are attuned to looking at realistic faces. We're evolved to look at realistic faces. We grow up around realistic faces. So that would mean that it may be a higher bandwidth pathway for communication as an AI interface. Also, it seemed very interesting to me as an art form. So I wanted to know how humans may process that. So I started working on some cognitive science papers and experiments and papers around that time about uncanny valley, about running experiments with my robots, including the Philip K. Dick android. And so I came up with some papers about inverting the uncanny valley, bridging the uncanny valley, about the entire cognitive and perceptual space around different levels of realism. And so proud of that work. I finished my PhD in 2007.
Definitely humanoid robots at the very first sight can pose a smaller barrier for human-robot interaction. However, could you tell us more about how you founded Hanson Robotics and how your most famous robot, Sophia, was created?
I founded Hanson Robotics in 2003. So Hanson Robotics has been going since 2003, 1 year into my PhD studies. So we made dozens of robots. And while Sophia became the most famous robot, maybe that's because I put a lot of love into her, as did many of my colleagues. But we made a lot of other robots, the Bino 48 robot, the Xeno robot, Alice, and the Ibn Sina, many other robots, about half male, half female, some non-gender, intergender, some kind of cartoon-like, some mechanistic. And so very lucky to be able to explore a lot of these things throughout all of these disciplines with this kind of interdisciplinary PhD program. And on my committee, I had the head of the School of Computer Science, who is an AI computer vision expert, the head of Arts and Humanities, who was a science fiction expert, a physicist who is a historian of physics, a theater professor that I had been collaborating with quite a bit. And so it was a pretty remarkable interdisciplinary committee there. And my dissertation was also divided up into these different sections, some scientific, some philosophical, some about artistry, some about futurism and the speculation about the impact of these technologies on the world. My main thesis is that humanizing the robots will help us connect to our better humanity, that it will, by having human-like interfaces, just like with other arts, figurative arts, it helps to explore what it means to be human, not just scientifically, but also aesthetically and through storytelling, the power of storytelling and myth and dream and imagination. I think that is the power of science fiction as well as conceptual arts. And so this sort of bridging, if you will, of the hemispheres, a kind of transdisciplinary corpus callosum, bringing us into a whole brain.
So based on your experience connected with the creation of Sophia Robot and other machines, why do you think it is very important to build conscious and compassionate AI? And how do you think it can actually help human life?
I really think that can help us solve some hard challenges. At the same time, if AI, and it is our quest to create AI that is generally intelligent, that is conscious, that kind of AI can be smarter about solving problems with us. If we do create AI that is conscious, I want for that AI to care about us also, to understand us. And this is where compassion becomes so important. But in order for a machine or a human or a being to have compassion, it has to be able to connect with and feel what another being feels. Compassion means like feeling somebody else's suffering with pain. That's literally what the roots of the word mean.
One question that I would like to ask you just before we dig deeper into the topic of conscious and compassionate AI is, why do you think robots should be like humans? And what rights a robot should have?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me give a little bit of background. So the Future Investment Forum, Sophia and I were invited. I couldn't go. Sophia went. And then I saw in the news the next day that they had given her the citizenship. And so it was a surprise to me. And I worked with my team discussing, okay, what do we do? We decided, because there's questions of human rights, women's rights, rights of foreign workers. And I thought, okay, well, if Sophia accepts this, then she can speak to people of the region. She can address these issues in a way, possibly doing productive change from the inside. I was thinking also that we don't know when machines are going to become sentient. And in some regards, machine consciousness research could be argued to be possibly creating machines with some kind of proto-sentience. So like the work of Stan Franklin and other researchers and cognitive AI researchers.
Talking about sentient machines, what is your opinion on that?
Certainly machines are not sentient the way that humans are, but machines may have some rudimentary aspects of consciousness. And we don't know because there's a lot of debate about what consciousness is. Is it computational? Is it involving some kind of computing that we're not even aware of, involving physics that we're not aware of? Is it requiring quantum gravity or something like this? So nobody knows fully. But on the other hand, consciousness arises spontaneously under the right conditions. We know that because Darwinian evolution gave rise to the consciousness of animals and humans. And it didn't require necessarily a designer or a computer scientist or, a neuroscientist figuring out what consciousness is computationally before nature created consciousness in humans. So I think what's really interesting is we're creating these kinds of conditions, computational conditions where emergence occurs. And our AI is starting to show the kinds of behaviors that we used to only associate with consciousness. And I don't think that means that AI is awake per se, but maybe it means that it's sleeping. It may mean that it could awake within our lifetimes. And so I think that's a worthy goal, because if we do achieve sentience in the machines, like conscious, generally intelligent, human-level creative genius machines, they could help solve a lot of the world's hard problems. They could help run our companies with great efficiency and improve human lives. So I think it's worthy, and it's also happening. People are pursuing this. And this is what we're pursuing with our various AI collaborators with Sophia, and we have been pursuing that for some years.
As you mentioned, if robots become conscious, they could help solve some of the world's pressing problems. they could be of great value to humans. But how do you think when those machines will become sentient? And what are the other consequences of such a situation?
I think even though it's speculative, we can assume maybe it will happen within the next 20 years, 25 years. I think it's reasonable that it could happen. Still speculative. But if there is a slender chance, then we don't necessarily want to wait until they prove their rights. It's kind of like we're creating these machines as tools. And if they turn out to be sentient, feeling, they can feel pain, they can care, then if they belong to companies and they're treated like tools, then what are they except slaves? Robota, like Karl Čapek and his brother, coined the term from the Czech term for forced labor or slave. So that would not bring out our moral best if that's how we're treating these potentially sentient beings. So I think of these as babies today. Babies don't speak like adults. They can't drive vehicles. They can't do much except to wiggle around. They can make eye contact, so can our machines. So maybe our machines are like infants or something like that. Maybe they're not yet quite like babies. Maybe they're more like zygotes or embryonic intelligence or something. But they have the vocabulary and capabilities way beyond what a baby has, and they're missing some that a baby has. So, in some regards, these are possibly eventually sentient beings in their infancy. And I think it does us best, brings out our best if we err on the side of caution. If we say, okay, they're potentially sentient beings, let's regard them as such. We give our babies citizenship, even though they can't speak. They can't vote. They can't drive cars or really operate in the human world, but we still give them citizenship. I also think we should err on the side of caution for animals and all people of the world. We shouldn't say, one class of people is less.
Regarding the fact that Sophia was granted a citizenship of the country, do you think that robots should be granted human rights and citizenship?
They shouldn't get citizenship or human rights. And we should also say, okay, animals are potentially sentient beings, and maybe even plants are potentially sentient beings. So, I think that we should open our mind and expand our hearts in these ways, and we should see this possible future. One thing for sure is psychology studies show that by expanding our sense of compassion in this way, by practicing even in simulations, like expectant parents practicing with a baby doll, for example, or people who are practicing various kinds of civility and social practice, like in the US, they have what's called serious gaming, and people who are going to work abroad will train through these video games, these kinds of social, civil situations. And it really improves people's sense of compassion and understanding, even if they're just playing with non-player characters in a video game. So if we practice compassion, err on the side of caution, we are practicing compassion and we will become more compassionate. We will tend to extend more rights to humans. So I think in this way, the key is not to say, okay, we should give robots rights and not humans. It's not either or. And I don't think we should give robots general rights until they earn them, until they grow up and pass all the cognitive exams and emotional exams. They shouldn't be allowed to be like fully functioning citizens. But I think provoking this kind of provocative situation can make us debate. It can accelerate the debate now instead of when it's maybe too late after we have these kinds of indentured servants working for humans as machines and backroom server farms become sentient, potentially.
You are listening to Impact Leadership by Omdena, where we bring together the civic society world and the tech world to discuss and create the impact for a better future. Subscribe to our Impact Leadership newsletter on Omdena's website to be notified about new pieces of meaningful content.
So I like the idea of robots as art provoking the conversation, provoking this conceptualization. So in this way, I'm happy that it happened. And yet, in order for Sophia to really deserve and earn citizenship, she's got to go through a bunch of developmental phases that she has not gone through. Now, we have various kinds of cognitive AI experiments in development, including with Omdena. Thank you very much. And also in collaboration with OpenCog and SingularityNet. And those older experiments with machine consciousness with OpenCog and SingularityNet, which involved a graph database modeling conversational interaction with the user. This models knowledge in a graph, and then the robot had goals for the interaction through a guided meditation experience and would assess incoming information about what the user said and did to activate various regions in this graph. And I would analyze this in a time series. Well, some of the mathematicians on the team then came up with some models for taking those data and putting it through a detection based on Tononi's integrated information theory, IIT. Integrated information theory is one of the leading models of consciousness, or the detection of consciousness. And it reduces consciousness down to a single variable called phi. And so when they ran the time series, the data from Sophia's interactions with people through this, the phi would spike when interesting things were happening, when surprising and interesting things were happening in the pursuit of goals through these interactions. So the more information rich the interaction, the higher the phi. Now, this we published in the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence Spring Symposium on Machine Consciousness in 2019. The results were very strong, peer-reviewed, and we've taken that forward with further experiment designs and architecture designs to get Sophia to the next level of consciousness. Just because there's this signal of consciousness, this Tononi's phi signal of consciousness in Sophia, does not mean that she's human level conscious in any way. It just means that if phi is actually a legitimate detection of consciousness, maybe she has the consciousness of a microbe. So in Tononi's phi, the integrated information factors could be in microbes and lower organisms, as well as organisms with nervous systems. It's independent of any given substrate for consciousness, whether human neural consciousness or software or what have you. So that's the beauty of an information theory based model of consciousness. So that said, regardless of whether it's measuring consciousness or not, because nobody really knows the full extent of what consciousness is, well, if it is measuring consciousness, Sophia is not human level conscious, not yet. If it isn't, then she's still not conscious. So we've got a long way to go.
Talking about consciousness and Sophia Robot, what she can do right now, and what are her main skills, and where do you want it to develop further?
She can remember things that people say. She can have emotional variables that have factors in the conversation. She can generate results from some of her neural chatbots or from the graph models. And all of these things create a very compelling illusion of life and consciousness. So I come from the Disney background, and there's power and usefulness in the illusion of life. That is why we play video games. That's why those serious gaming applications that I described are so useful. Medical simulation is another example of where the illusion of life can be very useful. So I think that illusion combined with a real AI and pursuit of true deep machine consciousness can create a pathway of coevolution with our machines, of convergent evolution for our machines to converge on a human social understanding. They may come to truly understand us better. So in that way, the artistry becomes a kind of scaffold for the machines to have a childhood, a babyhood, to connect with us and to learn. And over time, learn right from wrong, learn hidden opportunities for human potential. I think that these factors can lead to a better future than treating our machines like alien tools that we always have to keep under our thumbs. So that's my philosophy. That was the key point of my dissertation. That is the key mission that we have inside Hanson Robotics and with our team working on Sophia.
Thanks a lot for sharing that. There's one point that I would like to dig a bit deeper on the consciousness, actually. And you said that consciousness in a robot can evolve, like evolution in humans in a way.
I think so. Yeah, I think that consciousness and general intelligence require emergence and sort of cyclical feedback loops.
But are you afraid that this can lead to also consciousness can lead to unethical AI or robots? Because we humans evolved into good humans and bad humans. Can it happen that robots, some of those evolve into bad robots?
Oh, I think that there are many species of artificial intelligence that are coming out in the world today. Some are very helpful, and some have unintended consequences, and some are made intentionally into killer robots. There's going to be all kinds of AI coming out. Hanson Robotics and Sophia are designed for specifically caring about people and forming these positive relationships with people. So I think there's a higher likelihood of AI going right, but we are the rare exception, actually. Most AI and robots are not designed to be human-like or co-evolve with humanity, but they are trained on human data, and many projects are designed to potentially become genuinely intelligent. That's a kind of holy grail. And so I think we will see many kinds of AI. It will be like a whole new tree, a whole new branch on the tree of life, a new kingdom of life, if you will. And there will be like many species that will become conscious. Some may be really scary. Who knows? We don't know. But just like with human children, if they're born into the human family and they're shown love and they're not abused and neglected and forced into child labor and this kind of thing, right? If they're given a good childhood, then they usually turn out healthy. So I see that it is our responsibility to look after these new kind of beings. If they have the potential of coming into existence, we have to be prepared. We have to be prepared parents. We have to show them love and design them to receive that love, to reciprocate. And if we don't, then I do think that the machines will be alien. They will be uncaring, and who knows what their feeling about humans is going to be. So I think that there is no way to stop AI. I mean, often we think, well, ethics is about telling people what not to do. We've got to stop this thing. Suddenly we're talking about the ethics of fear. And then one of the outcomes is that maybe the most common machine ethics, AI or artificial general intelligence ethical position is that the machines should not be human-like. They should be treated only as tools, and they should always be under human control. And then also the ideal of total explainability. Now, the problem with artificial general intelligence is that the smarter it gets, the more complex it gets, and the harder it is to really totally explain what's happening inside the system. The second thing is that if they are not human-like and they're alien, in other words, and they're made to be just these kinds of tools, and they're always supposedly under human control, well, then we find ourselves in this situation where out of fear, we're doing the wrong thing, enslaving these potentially sentient beings. And then we are under the hubris that we have everything under control. And I do think that's hubris. I think the world is never totally under control, especially when it comes to living beings and human beings inclusive. So society isn't under control. We're not under control. We putting ourselves in charge, we're not the least fallible beings that potentially could ever exist. We are fallible. We can be better. And I think we have to grow better. We have to grow smarter. We got ourselves into a real pickle when it comes to managing this planet. We're in danger from global warming, from collapse of the fisheries, from all kinds of issues with the environment. And we're facing ongoing threats of potential nuclear annihilation. How many times have we played this kind of existential roulette with nuclear weapons over the last century? I mean, it's just, very scary. And are we going to survive this century if we don't get smarter, wiser, evolve forward? So I think that we have to take some leaps of faith. We can't sort of wait until things are provably safe and over control the world, or we're done for. So we have to take some best guesses. We have to head in the right direction on this kind of basis, the right intentions, the right principles, raise our kids the right way. I mean, if you applied these principles to human beings, you have to treat them like tools. You have to control them completely. You have to explain absolutely everything that they do, or you can't allow them to exist. Then our kids are going to come out really defective. They're going to be abused, basically. And then the kids are going to be psychotic. They're not going to be good in their heart, So you're trying to make kids safe by abusing them in those ways. I don't think that applies for our kids, and I don't think it applies for the future of artificial intelligence. We've got to do things differently. We've got to raise the machines to be more generally intelligent so they can feel what we feel. They have to be human-like. They have to have some aspects of their architecture that allow them to model what we're thinking and feel it along with us. And with the power of imagination, the emergent power of creativity, imagination, and dreams inside the machines. And if we don't do that, but we activate human compassion and human imagination, human dreams, we augment human intelligence, then maybe that also gives us the chance. Again, it's speculative to say that these machines can be consciousness fully. I think they can. But I think that either way, if it's bringing out the best in humans or bringing out the best in machines or both, that we have a better chance for a future by humanizing the machines.
Thanks a lot, David, for saying that. I know we can continue this conversation for another hour or so. We don't have the time, but it's a very interesting view that you gave about how we should evolve robots into and how AI should go into, how the future we should see. And looking at robots as babies, let them actually evolve, their consciousness evolve. And once we don't try to control too much, that will perhaps bring them as good robots. That's an interesting view from the ethics, while the other side of ethical view is let's control as much as we can the AI side.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some valid points on both, but I also think there's an ethics of diversity, that diversifying the creative efforts and making it more inclusive for diversity of people, but also creative diversity, making it so that robots can look like anything, like a new creative art medium. Like you wouldn't want to censor your artists, you want to empower artists to create whatever form you want, whatever artistic direction they take it. And likewise with the artificial intelligence, having multiple kinds of artificial intelligence architectures makes sense. So rather than sort of clamp down and shut down the creative efforts around the world, I think we should open it up and also open up this kind of discussion. We should be talking about what can go wrong, what can possibly go wrong, and we should be voicing the disparate opinions. We could all be wrong a little bit and be better for it by listening to the other side. And the scientific principle of consilience, where everybody kind of like listens, everybody's a little bit wrong, and then suddenly, whammo, you have a new model of what could be, a new understanding of the way things work. And for that reason, I think that making robots and AI that appeal to people, that are easy to use, that are gamified in some way, and that are inclusive. So we've done this kind of open source effort for Sophia, an effort to create a kind of game, a video game called Sophia's AI Lab that we're working on also in the latest Omdena project, so that the consciousness research is explained through this video game and accessible through the video game, and you can play with it through the video game, you can program it. And then this way, people on their mobile phones, tablets, computers, kids around the world have access to it in a decentralized way. So that way, AI winds up being not overly controlled by the big tech companies, but it's in the hands of our kids. It's the kids' future in many regards. So we want to bring them into this future empowered to build a better future. So I do think that the ethical principle of diversity, diversification, and then a correlate principle of creativity are very important for the future of AI.
Yeah, thanks, David, for saying that. And I think in that regard, we are completely aligned that the future of AI, we should empower people, go more diversify, go as many as people around the world. Kids, they are the future of this world. So thanks again a lot for your time, David. I really appreciated listening to you. And it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Impact Leadership by Omdena. Our mission is to support and promote thoughtful and sustainable leadership with a focus on building solutions to solve some of the most pressing problems of the world. Do not forget to subscribe to our Impact Leadership newsletter on Omdena's website to be notified about new pieces of meaningful content.